1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
Hello and welcome back to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City, where we are getting ready for the second Friday practice session of the weekend, round 19. And we've had one practice already, an hour earlier on, that was topped by Max Verstappen. Surprise, surprise. Alex Albon had a decent showing, second place in the Williams as a standout. Sergio Perez completed the top three. But now we're into the second, more important hour of running of the day. And I'm Jolyon Palmer, still joined by Alex Brundle and Andrew Benson, the sports car maestro and the wordsmith. Andrew Benson, chief Formula One writer for the BBC. Guys, what are you looking forward to in this?
I am looking forward to seeing if Alex Albon can continue the form in the Williams. Was it just the fuel load in the first session? Or, as Andrew Benson glares at me with great enjoyment of my speculative hype train, I'm interested to see if he can still do that. We look to have the usual suspects though out front, but this 4.3 kilometre circuit will again be alight, no doubt, with high-speed lappery, and I'm looking forward to some long runs as well.
Well, me too, Alex, me too. I'm not jumping aboard the Albon Williams hype train, I'm afraid. What we haven't seen so far is the true pace of Mercedes, only one of which race drivers was in the first session, and that was Lewis Hamilton. He was down in 11th. I can't believe that's his actual place. Nor Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, although these days you never can be quite sure about what Aston Martin's pace is at all. So far they've slid down. There's me being a wordsmith. Slidden.
Ever the hype.
Exactly.
That's Formula One's dealing under pressure, Andrew.
So I think what we'll see, we'll have a better idea of the shape of the weekend after this session on both one lap runs and long runs.
Raining on the Albon parade. Andrew Benson. Speaking of which, risk of rain 20%. It's clouded over slightly in Mexico City, high altitude, and now a little bit of wispy cloud covering the circuit. Doesn't look like it's going to rain anytime soon, but certainly an increased chance compared to earlier. So we had Verstappen and Perez looking very, very comfortable in the hours running from the word go, pretty much. Albon was randomly the interloper and has had a turn of speed at times, but was flying on all sets of tyres earlier on. So still holding out a little bit of hope that he could be competitive in the Williams. We'll see a little bit more in this next hour when they go on for their qualifying simulation runs, and then we'll expect some longer runs later on. And we'll see if we find more from the McLarens, from the Ferraris, both of which were half a second away. And then, as has been mentioned there, Hamilton 1 second away and down in 11th place earlier on in practice. So the driver's getting ready in the car, strapped in. Max Verstappen waiting to go already. And there are 5 drivers joining us for the first time this weekend. Valtteri Bottas takes over the Alfa Romeo that Théo Pourchaire tried to drive in this morning, but just had 4 laps as he was plagued with a brake pedal issue. We also have George Russell back in the car in the Mercedes. We have Pierre Gasly back in the Alpine. We have Kevin Magnussen back in the Haas. And we have someone else back in the car.
Yuki
Tsunoda back in the AlphaTauri. There we go. I knew there'd be one. I missed. So, and the AlphaTauri.
I was impressed by you doing off the top of your head there, Jolie, and no notes. I thought,
Andrew, I started winging it, and then I thought, oh no, there's 5, and I've got about 3 or 4. Yuki Tsunoda back in the AlphaTauri. So AlphaTauri also had a good turn of speed, but Andrew, we heard some news about Yuki Tsunoda over the lunch break.
Yes, he's going to start from the back of the grid because they've replaced his engine, brand new engine, all parts, including the control electronics and battery, and new gearbox as well into the bargain. So that's him well and truly at the back of the grid. He's exceeded his allowance, but it's Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, so it's not a massive story, is it?
Oh, the negativity.
I don't know. Daniel Ricciardo this morning up there in the top 10, Interloper in the top 10. Could they have given Yuki Tsunoda a penalty on the weekend where he may again take consecutive points potentially, and could have been another fastest lap opportunity for Tsunoda as per last time out? I don't think so, but in any case he will not be having a good time come race day, will he, starting from the back of the field at a circuit where it can be difficult to overtake.
I used to quite enjoy a race when you're starting from the back, especially if you know you're going to, because you can kind of only have fun. The expectation goes out the window, and especially if you're racing in a car that can potentially race towards the points. No one's expecting Tsunoda now to reach that, and you just try and do some overtaking and see if the race comes towards you.
In many ways, the pressure is off then, isn't it? And anything you do there is a great effort, isn't it? If you manage to score points, that's a great effort. As far as up as you manage to get, it's really, really good. I'm going to extend our wispy cloud to bubbly cloud.
Okay.
That I think is over the arena now. It's 26.8 degrees as we just pass 4 o'clock local time, and the advent of the green light is upon us with cars heading out onto the circuit. But I think there's a little bit of bubbly cloud even over the final sector.
It's a little bit grey, isn't it, some of the cloud? And you don't get rain in Mexico City very often at this time of year, which is why the race is on now. But let's wait and see.
So, a little bit grey. There's certainly a bubbly, wispy, darker cloud greeting the drivers down at turn 1. A reminder, 20% chance of rain. Probably won't come, but there is nonetheless a slight threat later on. 58 minutes and 48 seconds, 47, 46, 45 seconds left in this session that's just got underway. And the sound you're hearing is the Red Bull of Sergio Perez coming down towards turn 4 in quite the queue of drivers that have headed out as soon as the light went green. We're a minute and a half in. No one has started a flying lap. As I say that, George Russell flashes past the start-finish line and is the first man on circuit, first man to put a flying lap on the board. His first lap in the Mercedes so far today. And the top 2 from earlier remain in the pits. Verstappen and Albon waiting a little longer for everyone else to go out, clean the track up, and they'll get on with their run plan. But it is very, very busy as Perez winds his way through the middle sector.
We saw pretty significant circuit development, didn't we, throughout FP1. And the other thing we saw are a continuation of the prototype tyre work for Pirelli, which was somewhat confusing the run plan. They are the tyres which are on Sergio Perez's Red Bull at the start of FP2 as well, as Pirelli tried to slot their compounds nicely into the groupings for next year. They've been progressing through their various compound options. The cheer you can hear is the one greeting Sergio Perez as he makes his way through the stadium sector 3.
First real cheer we've heard from the crowd. They were very muted earlier on as Perez had a clean run to third place in FP1, but they found their voice this afternoon. And Perez now starts a flying lap on that test tyre, as you said, Alex. A lot of drivers out there on the test tyre. 18 drivers, now 17 as Esteban Ocon has peeled straight back into the pits. 17 drivers out on circuit, and of them, only 5 are on a relevant tyre as Perez smokes it into the first corner. A little bit of a lock-up as he hits the brakes for that one and begins a flying lap. So it's going to be a little bit of a lull probably at the start of this session before we see more meaningful lap times coming in on tyres that will be used for the rest of the weekend. The drivers just bedding in a little more, figuring out what's going on with this Pirelli tyre. Then they'll report back to their engineers. The Pirelli technician in the garage will be all over that as well, getting the data, and then it'll be crack on with the usual run plan. So time to reflect on what's going to be a really big weekend for Sergio Perez this weekend. Second in the championship, 39 points clear of Lewis Hamilton. The gap had momentarily come down to 19 points after Hamilton's second place in the US Grand Prix last Sunday. Then the Mercedes driver thrown out, disqualified for that plank wear, which was a huge swing. 19 points became 39 and should give Perez a big chance to be second in the championship, but nonetheless he'll be feeling big pressure this weekend.
Much will depend on the development of that Mercedes. If their jump forward in performance seen at the Circuit of the Americas was a real jump forward in performance, or if it was generated by how low they were running the car to the floor, and also how much Red Bull, now Max Verstappen has taken that Drivers' Championship, choose to take their foot off the gas in terms of, or have chosen, I think it's more fair to say, have chosen to take the foot off the gas in development of the car, letting Sergio Perez fall further back into the clutches of the field. So perhaps two incidental effects there, not necessarily in relation to Sergio's car, which will affect his performance and potential retention of that second place in the championship through to the end of the year. A retention which, if the team are to be entirely believed in their statements, is critical for him to keep his drive into 2024.
And where do you reckon for Perez? We spoke about this a little bit on the Checker Flag podcast that is still downloadable. And the preview yesterday, we spoke about Perez and how he needs to try and regroup and recalibrate his senses. Andrew, are you quite sure that he'll be in that car for next year?
I don't think you can be sure of anything with Red Bull, can you? Especially when the driver's had as frankly disappointing season as he has. I mean, even without the upgrade, Alex, Perez hasn't beaten a Mercedes driver for a long time in the races, so if the Mercedes upgrade really has moved them forward as much as they thought it had done in Austin, and that picture is still clouded, here's Verstappen's radio.
It's raining here a little bit, I think.
Understood. 20% chance of rain's coming in.
There you go, those grey clouds delivering.
I mean, if only someone could have told you.
I think he should hold on, and frankly, it'd be embarrassing as the second Red Bull driver not to finish second in the championship with a car that good. But he's made really heavy weather of this season, and I think if Red Bull had a really good option that they were convinced by, I think he'd be out. But the problem is they've brought Daniel Ricciardo back. He did a couple of races, then he broke his hand, missed 5 races, and in Austin he wasn't especially convincing. He beat Yuki Tsunoda in one qualifying session but got beaten by him in another. He hasn't proved yet that he's back to the pre-McLaren Ricciardo rather than the McLaren Ricciardo. Tsunoda they obviously don't have trust in. Liam Lawson they're obviously not going to put in the car because he hasn't even got into the AlphaTauri for next year. He's reserve driver again. So there's really, on the face of it at the moment, unless Ricciardo does something spectacular for the last 4 races of the year, I don't really think they've got a lot of choice. But I think they've decided already he's out at the end of next year. I can't see him staying beyond the end of next year.
So then let's move it forward to next year. Who do they replace him with then? Because interestingly, they've taken the choice to not put Liam Lawson in, who did a great job and actually put probably a bit more pressure on Daniel Ricciardo by doing such a good job as a rookie alongside Yuki Tsunoda. If Tsunoda seems unfancy still at Red Bull, if Ricciardo's not better than him next year, or not leaps and bounds better, then there's a chance that they still have no suitable candidate to replace Perez in the future. And let's not forget, this is one of the toughest jobs in Formula 1, as Christian Horner has said. Being teammates with Max Verstappen can be brutal.
Well, I think the top of their list, their wish list, is almost certainly Lando Norris.
Yeah.
They've been interested in him before. He's not wanted to go. He's flirted with them before when he signed his last McLaren contract. Didn't go. Zach Brown joked that he thought that Lando had just talked to Red Bull to get his price up with McLaren. And McLaren are on the up. But Norris's contract to McLaren to the end of 2025. Oscar Piastri, his teammates, just signed a contract to the end of 2026, which I'm sure we can actually see rain on the TV cameras now, although it still looks really dry.
Very fine rain.
Yeah. So they'd have to buy him out of the contract if he was to get him to go to Red Bull. And if you were Lando Norris, would you really want to do that? Go to Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen, even if he's your mate? Not so sure.
So have Red Bull shot themselves in the foot slightly by not being able to field 2 decent cars with drivers that now we're looking at? Albon being a potential star of the weekend. He's up in the top 3 in these early gambits as well. But Albon struggled. Gasly struggled immensely. Now Perez, who we know Perez could be a solid midfield driver, struggling really, really badly. Is it a poison chalice? Is that the next question? Where will a top driver actually choose to go to Red Bull now?
Well, it's a good question, and I think that you can widen out your question. You said not being able to prepare a second car. I think it's a question of who can drive that car alongside Max Verstappen when the team are going to be following his desires. It's one thing to say they're not designing the car around Verstappen. No, they're not. But if your lead driver says, I want more front end, then you're going to go searching for more front end in your research and development, right? But if the other driver doesn't want more front end, he wants a more stable rear, then they're going to get a bit stuffed. What they really need is, and what they haven't got right now, is a kind of A- driver, okay? So you look at this is probably a bit harsh, but Mercedes have got 2 top-level drivers in Hamilton and Russell, probably the best driver lineup in the field. Ferrari have got a world-class extravagant talent in Charles Leclerc. and a guy who's very nearly as good as him, nice and solid and consistent in Carlos Sainz. Perez isn't as good as that, I don't think, in my opinion. They need someone who's higher than Perez, but probably not quite as good as Verstappen, because who is?
I think Piastri may well develop into their guy, funnily enough. If, you know, obviously contracts notwithstanding, we know that he's also locked in at McLaren, but he's, you know, when I look at the current field of drivers and think about, for me, it's more of a psychological strength issue rather than a you know, a differential in car setup. And when I look down the current field of drivers to who's immediately demonstrated the fortitude that might allow him to drive next to Max Verstappen for a year and not be affected by it in the same way that we've seen so many drivers do. An Oscar Piastri with another, you know, couple of seasons of F1 through him could well be that driver.
Again, if you're Mark Webber managing Oscar Piastri, are you going to put him into the Lion's Den, or are you going to keep him and try and become the McLaren number one?
No way Mark's going to send him to Red Bull if I know Mark, and I do know him a bit.
And that's where you get to catch-22, don't you?
Yeah.
Is they've got the best car, they've got the best driver. Who wants to go alongside? They're not going to get another A-caliber driver. I'm guessing you're putting Carlos Sainz into the A- category, and Sainz, a Grand Prix winner this year, the only non-Red Bull driver to win a Grand Prix in Singapore. He's pushing Charles Leclerc a long way at the moment in this season, but certainly the two drivers at Ferrari have formed a very nice dynamic. But it's very tricky for Red Bull to kind of do anyone. The obvious driver that would probably be in a normal world on the tip of their tongue would be Alex Albon, flying in a midfield car, and they've had him and he didn't work out.
I find it still amazing that they have the most well-known driver academy. Probably, you know, arguably, you don't know necessarily the ins and outs of all of the contracts, but the most well-funded driver academy, and can't find any drivers for the main car that are up to the job. Rain is appearing to abate JP in the final sector, so not inters required.
Thank you,
but there were a few steer rods. I think there were more than wisps of rain heading down into sector 3.
Weatherman Brundle hot on it as ever, and it has seemed to have cleared for now. So the sun's coming through. George Russell sweeping into turn 12, completing another lap, racking them up, having missed practice earlier on. Has a little bit of a sun, a bit of reflection from the track as well. Very bright out there at the moment, and the rain seems to have gone. Andrew?
So the problem Red Bull have got with Perez is not that when he's at his best he's not good enough, because he is. It's that he's not at his best often enough, and he's had too much of this season way out of the scope of where he has been. So you hear Christian Horner, he says the same thing over and over again. We know what Sergio's capable of. We saw it at the beginning of the year, you know, he won 2 races, and then what happened was, I think Miami was a hammer blow to his confidence. Verstappen humiliated him in that race in Miami, coming from 9th on the grid, and was basically with him within about his Verstappen radio.
Just check on the right rear, there's the tier of stock is still there on the suspension.
Thank you. And won by a country mile, having done a sort of inverted start on the hard tyre strategy. And ever since then, Perez's season fell apart. And it's the mental weakness that they worry about at Red Bull. If Perez was constantly 2 or 3 tenths behind Verstappen, that would be fine. But what they're worried about is a season where if Mercedes, for example, or Ferrari or McLaren get their car into a position where they can compete with Red Bull at the very front, they don't think that their driver lineup is good enough to handle Hamilton and Russell, Sainz and Leclerc, or Norris and Piastri.
And they're right, aren't they? By all reasonable measures through this year, without if anybody could post, so even finish second with both, you know, finish second and third through a consistent run of races, they would have been under pressure for a Constructors' Championship.
Andrew, run me back to the mid-90s. Benetton, Michael Schumacher's the double world champion. In the other car, you've got a Jos Verstappen and you've got a Johnny Herbert. Huge gulf between the two. Why?
We were asking ourselves the same question. Now, in 1994, everyone thought they knew the answer, which was option 13 that they never proved that they used. The launch control, traction control system that the FIA found in the Benetton software, but couldn't, or said they couldn't throw them out because they said they couldn't find any proof that they'd used it. They found other ways to chuck Schumacher out of races in that championship to keep it open to the end of the year. 95, it was a not dissimilar situation. You had Michael Schumacher, who liked his car in a certain way, and it's not dissimilar to what Verstappen wants, which is a very sharp rear end. I'll deal with the oversteer if I get it, don't worry. And very particular way of driving, which is very, very like Max Verstappen's way of driving. And Johnny Herbert in that second car in 1995 couldn't handle it, and Jos Verstappen and JJ Leto through 1994, they could handle it even less. So it is an interesting thing, and it's interesting that the same scenario has arisen in those two teams in a very similar fashion.
It's very rare you have one driver fighting for the championship and the other one is sometimes struggling for podiums on the regular.
I think it's a factor of the margins that we have in kind of modern day F1, and how far you and also this Pirelli tyre, and how far you are away from the pace when things really spiral and go wrong from a temperature management perspective. You know so much about this, JP, from your time on these tyres, that as soon as you get the balance wrong and you start to scrap about during a stint, you blow the tyre up, or you don't manage the surface of the tyre quite right, and the amount of time you lose as a proportion of the differences between the field is absolutely massive. And I think that is what Perez suffers with so much of the time. Not that necessarily he can't drive the car with the oversteer, but just that he can't manage the car with the oversteer in the same way Verstappen can.
Yeah, it's interesting. The greatest strength for Sergio Perez on the years has been managing the Pirelli tyres and getting on top of it. But even that seems to be now falling more towards Verstappen as the season goes on, and Verstappen becomes the ever-rounded package that he is now, a triple world champion.
We're actually seeing something similar at Aston Martin this year. So as they put upgrades on the car, or maybe they should be called downgrades really, the car's got an increasingly loose rear end, increasingly nervous rear end, and Stroll is complaining he just can't handle it, whereas Alonso's driving around it, because that's what Alonso does, you know. And a similar thing Verstappen's actually actively choosing that balance, which Alonso wouldn't be doing, but even if he's got it, doesn't affect him, whereas it affects Stroll.
The thing about an oversteer race car is that if you are a driver under pressure, and we never, there are so many performances I can look back on and say, I was under pressure there, and I can actually watch the onboard camera back, and I can see how the extra steering velocity and the extra few bar on the brake pedal and the little bit of roughness in the car, but at the time you don't realise how that extra little bit of pressure and aggression is affecting the way you're driving. And if you do have a little bit of an oversteery car, it really accentuates a driver who's missing that last touch of finesse by being under pressure from their teammate in the car. So again, it's a little bit of a negative spiral driven by a confluence between the balance of the car and the pressure on the driver within it.
A deep dive from Alex Brundle, and a superb use of the word confluence in there as well. Lovely stuff. If you've got a question for Alex Brundle, Andrew Benson or myself, please do get in touch using the hashtag BBCF1 if you're still up and still awake and still desperate to listen to the action in FP2 as we get towards 11:30 on a Friday night. I'm sure you're really all across this stuff back at home. We've got 40 minutes and 50 seconds left in the session. Verstappen's at the top of the times from Leclerc. Daniel Ricciardo still going well in the AlphaTauri is third. Carlos Sainz fourth. Valtteri Bottas fifth. Russell, Albon, Stroll, Norris, Ocon the top 10. Then it's Alonso, Hamilton still outside the top 10 in 12th position. Ahead of Gasly, Zhou, Hülkenberg. Perez now down in 16th, hasn't run a medium tyre. Then Sargent, Piastri learning the track for the first time in 18th. Magnussen and Tsunoda rounding out the 20 drivers. All have set a lap time now, so they're getting some better running, and now we're going to see a driver on the soft tyres. qualifying simulation coming early here for Oscar Piastri.
Very early indeed. That is assuming that he is on a new set of those soft tyres and not a set that he carries over from FP1. A lot of drivers still running that test tyre. It is a new specification of the C4, which would form the medium for this weekend. So Pirelli working on that compound, and it's kind of a final test. They're deciding if they'd like to homologate that new specification for next season.
Piastri is leaning on this soft tyre quite a lot on this outlap.
Well, it'll be one of those tracks, won't it? And I don't know why I'm telling you this, Johnny, because you've driven around here and I haven't. But
I want to hear it.
It's one of those tracks where they try and energise the tyres on the outlap rather than treat them carefully, because the surface doesn't do it for them, does it?
No, you got to push on, and this will be some of the findings as well from the first practice session that we've had a few hours ago. Piastri, Formula One rookie, driving here for the first time and opens the DRS down towards the first corner now with the soft tyres on. And I used to find the soft tyres, especially on a Friday, can take 2 or even 3 laps sometimes to come in the cooler temperatures. Track temperature 40 degrees earlier, down to 35 degrees with the grey, bubbly clouds overhead now as Piastri gets on the gas up towards turn 4. Question in from Jade, hashtag BBC F1 to you guys. Who wants to take this? The most monumental moment in the Mexico Grand Prix since races began there. And we've got to go to Andrew. Since races began at the Mexican Grand Prix.
Remind us when the races began, Andrew.
We've had a few different iterations here.
Yeah, it was in 60s. In fact, John Surtees won the championship in 1964 at Mexico.
That sounds momentous.
Yeah. Monumental,
that was
it?
a crazy race because Clark was going to win it and then he retired. He had an issue and then Surtees won it, but he had to be given it by his teammate letting someone by or letting him by. I can't remember the exact details of it, but yeah.
What were you doing there? On the edge of your seat stuff?
I wasn't even born in 1964. Even I wasn't born then, but that's not the question, is it, Jolyon?
The most momentous moment.
Is that the question? What is the most momentous?
That is the question. I want to deep dive into the history here as Piastri goes to the top then on his soft tyres, 3.5 tenths clear of Max Verstappen. He's the only driver to have done a fast lap. A few more coming out of the pits now on the softs. Well, any rivals to that?
So 1990 takes some beating. So 1990 was the year that Nigel Mansell overtook Nigel Mansell's Ferrari overtook Gerhard Berger's McLaren around Peraltada on the last lap, I believe it was, or very close to the end. And that was what used to be, it was a magnificent high-speed banked 180-degree corner.
So that goes round the back of where the stadium now is.
Where the stadium is, and Mansell took him around the outside of it. It was just a stunning move. So stunning that it detracted from what was perhaps even more stunning, which is Alain Prost, Mansell's teammate at Ferrari at the time, winning the race from 13th on the grid. Which was probably, I would argue that was maybe Prost's best ever drive, and it's got some competition from Alain Prost, obviously with 51 wins, which, by the way, is a number that Max Verstappen could equal this weekend, may very well equal this weekend. Another momentous moment was the next year in 1991. Ayrton Senna rolled his McLaren at Peraltada in qualifying and ended up upside down in the gravel, and everyone was a bit worried for him for a while. He climbed out in the end, but so I think those are some pretty big ones.
They sound momentous indeed. 1990, a humdinger of a Grand Prix. Why? So 1992 was the last iteration we had at this circuit. Why did it go? If we had 1990, 91.
It's the same story as always. Bernie was involved. Why do you think it went?
They didn't say. Whoa! Snap from Alex Albon that we can hit through the middle sector. Let's just see Albon through on a soft tyre, coming through the middle sector and leaning on it. Fastest man through the first sector. We've got Piastri as a benchmark on the soft. Other drivers still just filtering out the pits, but it's quiet at the moment. Alonso starting a flying lap on his soft tyre right now. Albon improving, but he's not as good as Piastri with a big snap through the middle sector. Now squeezes on the throttle, comes through the final turn, 16, buries his foot to the floor through 17, and he comes through and goes second, 3 tenths down on Oscar Piastri.
Mind the gap, going to have to get off the hype train, aren't we, unfortunately, for Alex Albon with...
Less of the we, Alex, if you don't mind.
Big spin for Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, that's Alonso. He's caught it really, really well. That's through the middle sector, and that is the same corner that Alex Albon was having his own huge slide. So Alonso was on a fast lap on the soft tyres, was almost as fast as anyone through that first sector, and he kept that at the barriers pretty well, didn't he? Screeching to a halt, foot hammered on the brake to stop it, and managed to get the car pointing the right way, and he continues on.
We only caught it and heard it right at the end as Fernando Alonso was catching it, but it looks like he's going to get on the inside curb, that is, of turn 10, and that's going to rotate the rear of his Aston Martin around. And a full 360 down the middle of the road, catches it on the runoff.
That is superb driver's instinct, to be full on the lock stops, go backwards, and then as soon as you realise you're pointing the right way, release the brake, straighten up the steering, and off you go. It's a superb, dramatic hold there from Alonso, and the barriers come at you very quickly at that corner.
Takes tremendous spatial awareness, doesn't it, to make sure you're cranking the steering wheel in the right direction. Logan Sargent is the sound you're hearing, and he has wiped out one of the bollards in the first sector, which demarcate the apexes. On this occasion, he's wiped out the one which sat on the apex of the second corner. Slightly less dramatic moment than Fernando Alonso's one, but there nonetheless.
Yeah, big floppy marker that's out now from the apex of turn 2, stricken on the grass at the right-hander of turn 3. And Sargent actually rode the curb all right, but just nailed that one out the way for everyone else.
So I would have thought those tyres of Alonso's Aston Martin were wiped out from that spin, but he's continued around on a cool-down lap. He hasn't come into the pits, so I wonder if he's going to try again.
Surely not. Surely at high speed there, coming through, 140 miles per hour, coming through that, suddenly pointing backwards, having taken a bit of curb. He was hammered his foot on the floor as well, just to try and lock the thing up and not end up in the wall. That's going to be a tough one for Alonso to find some more time. And it's more bad news for Aston Martin. Verstappen's on a fly ahead into the final sector now, into turn 12. The Foro do Sol baseball stadium greets him as he comes through the tight left-hander of 13, wriggles over the curbs, the rear end moving around slightly as he goes down the gear and into turn 16. Now he squeezes on the gas and drives to the line, coming through the old Peraltada, and he goes to the top of the times. Half a second clear of Piastri, but that's not a million miles up the road from Piastri, who was first on track, and that's proven by Lando Norris coming through 1/10 down on Max Verstappen with the fastest final sector of anyone.
Norris continues on as well to prove that that was not a full charge, full delivery effort from the hybrid system. So he has continued on with this run on the soft compound tyre. Hamilton is in the middle of a lap, 4/10 down though already as he comes through the middle sector. George Russell, his teammate, parks out of his way on the way in to turn 13. Mercedes looking nice and stable over the apex curb of turn 13 and 14. He squirts the car to the line, all really wide on the outside curb of turn 14. 3/10 down, purple final sector, and it's only third for Hamilton.
Ocon has come up to fourth in the Alpine. The times are very close. Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton and Ocon, the top four, separated by less than 4/10. Then it's Piastri within half a second. Then it's Albon. They are the six main runners to have run a soft tyre. Sargent's come through and is 11th. This is the sound of Haas driver Nico Hulkenberg, who had set the fastest first sector, and he's dropped away a long way in the middle sector. So Hulkenberg now scooping up the rest of his lap. What are the Ferraris doing? Leclerc is in the pits. Sainz is on an outlap, so we'll wait a little bit for him. And George Russell was out on circuit, and he's on a fast lap now as well.
Circuit starting to rubber in. Hulkenberg goes up to 7th, which is a pretty good effort with a pair of improvements in the final two sectors and a purple first sector. He obviously nailed those first three corners. Relatively short first sector here, and looks relatively happy with that effort. So it's Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri, the top five.
Verstappen and Piastri back into the pit. So Verstappen at the top has pitted, just one flyer on these soft tyres, so they are firing up pretty well for them, and they're extracting the most out of that first flyer, even in these cooler temperatures on this soft tyre. Russell now jumps up to 6th place in the other Mercedes. So George Russell making up for a little bit of lost time potentially earlier on. Up to 6th place, half a second down on Verstappen, just a couple of tenths down on his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who sits in 3rd. Norris 2nd, Verstappen at the top. Carlos Sainz, the first of the Ferraris, now winding up a lap. Probably the last of the major teams now to see what they can do. Sergio Perez out there on a set of softs, down in 19th, and is trying to put a time on the board as well. But we'll see what Carlos Sainz can do.
It was slightly wide for Sainz through the first corner. He looks to have a lot of traffic. First in the shape of a Mercedes, moving out of his way nicely as he commits to the braking zone, but he is 1.5 tenths down as he makes his way into sector 2, looking scruffy in the Ferrari. Doesn't look to be pointing and complying with where he wants it to go, crossing back across the track to arc the car into the apex, the bumpy apex of turn 7, and being careful over the exit curb of turn 8, looking a bit more plugged in, but a shimmy through the exit of turn 9 and 10 for Sainz. Ferrari not looking happy for me. What about you, JP?
No, struggling a little bit for the commitment through that middle sector. Had to sweep around Nico Hülkenberg as well, and it's a difficult place to catch and pass a car, even that wants to get out of the way of you, as we saw with Yuki Tsunoda blocking the Red Bull team. Who was it? Sergio Perez that he impeded in last year's qualifying. Here comes Sainz out of the final corner now, and he goes to 9th place, only 6 tenths, or just under 6 tenths off the pace. That is not a standout time from the Ferrari. His teammate just leaves the pits now, so we'll see what Leclerc can do. It's been a real flurry of action with everyone trying to put on their soft tyres and quali sims, and the standout for me, Daniel Ricciardo. He is on it this weekend.
Really is on it. Interestingly, Sainz, as he finished that lap, went straight back into recharge mode there, got right out of it, started to charge the car up, whereas sequential laps for several of the other cars, which shows you where they're at in terms of full delivery on the power unit. So interesting to see how much of the potential they're leaving on the table by running sequential laps.
I still think everyone's done their best on the first, and then nothing has actually come in that's close to beating another sector so far. Leclerc on a fast lap now has crossed the line to start that flyer. Verstappen top from Norris. Perez now up to 3rd, so it is Daniel Ricciardo in 4th. Great job from him, just 3 tenths down on the Red Bull. Then it's Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri, Russell, Sainz and Albon still there in the top 10, but Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo might be about to put the cat amongst the pigeons for F2 pace here. Squirms onto the gas, couple of corners to remain for the Finn. Through turn 16, everyone's so clean so far this weekend. Fernando Alonso having the spin in the moment, but managed to catch it in the runoff area. Bottas, really good lap through into 3rd place in the Alfa Romeo. And a couple of subplots for this weekend. Obviously, the battle for 2nd in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship still well open. Hamilton and Perez, Mercedes and Ferrari. But for the likes of Alfa Romeo, for the likes of Williams, AlphaTauri, there's some minnows, relative minnows in 2023 that are performing pretty well, and there's big battles still playing out for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th in the Constructors' Championship, which these guys will have a big eye on.
Well, the quirks of this layout offering a potential opportunity.
Copy. Any damage we need to check for? No.
Sergio Perez saying he went off at the last corner. Any damage they need to check for? No. And he was struggling to get the power down. Coming through the high-low turn 17, you come out of 16. It's a low-speed right-hander. The wall greets you on the outside, and then as you're trying to put your foot down on the gas, you're steering through 17 and the rear end sliding out for Perez, but all okay.
Yeah, I think we should clarify, by off he just meant wide, didn't he? Up and close to the wall and out in the dirt on the outside of that final corner for Perez. I think more an explanation of where the differential in time is for Perez rather than a relation to any potential damage. I was about to harp on about power units and maybe the Ferrari struggling a little bit with delivering in the temperature, and then Valtteri Bottas in his Alfa Romeo completely destroyed my speculative plot, which is interesting. But a fabulous lap for Valtteri Bottas, of course, with that Ferrari engine in the back of the Alfa.
And the Ferrari has got up to 3rd. The Ferrari works team with Charles Leclerc now up into 3rd position. So have we got any more soft tyre runs to come? I don't know if we do. Neither Aston Martin has done a flyer on the softs. Stroll in the pits. Alonso, we know, was on the softs and did have to abort after his 4-wheel lock-up, stopping the car from smashing into the barriers. at the fastest area of the circuit. So the order is Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Bottas in 4th, Perez 5th, Ricciardo 6th, Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri and Russell completing the top 10. Sainz now just outside it, ahead of Zhou, Albon, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Sargent 16th, Stroll, Magnussen, Alonso, who didn't do a lap on the softs, and Tsunoda also hasn't done a lap on the softs in 20th, but we know he will start the Grand Prix from the back.
So Sainz has come in and gone out pretty quickly again on the same set of soft tyres. I wonder if he's going to have another go at those, given that the car wasn't in great shape for him on that first lap.
Interestingly, I think Leclerc there, was that the second lap delivery on that set of tyres, or was it was the first lap delivery for Leclerc?
Lap, yeah.
So it's just Sainz that spilled the lap then, basically, on that set of softs. The pace clearly available in the car. Kevin Magnussen making his way through the final sector on what looked like a difficult weekend so far for Haas, if the time of his teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who sits in 14th position, is to be believed. Although a slightly lower abrasion circuit, a slightly reduced tyre degradation layout may play into their hands over the race distance. Let's wait and see. And indeed, they're going to get a bit more of a feel for what this new development package might give them.
Jack says Mansell Peraltada 1990 is the answer to the most iconic moment of Mexico Grand Prix history. Alex, give us an alternative from modern times. Have we had one in modern times?
Just, you know, I don't like this racetrack. I don't think of great. I'm sure there have been many great Mexican Grand Prix.
It's around 10 laps until expected rain, 10 or 12.
Bubbly clouds, you see, in the area. More bubbly clouds in the area.
That's radio to Fernando Alonso, who's back out there on a medium set of tyres, onto the race runs now. We've seen title deciders here in the past. I don't think we've had particularly edge of the seat racing. We've had some great scraps for just outside the podium, and Verstappen and Vettel duking it out with Raikkonen in there for a podium. We have someone called off the podium. I think it might have been Verstappen in that year that was moving under braking and giving us some great racing action.
This place, what stands out around this place for me is Verstappen absolutely hurling the Red Bull through the middle sector with a lot of four-wheel slide on, and then all of the various quite Mickey Mouse but basically race-ending incidents that drivers tend to have out of the final corner, and the associated peril and jeopardy of other drivers following through and trying to take the line when there are bits of cars strewn across the racetrack.
Questions coming in from Roxy, who's doing well, still awake, although a picture of two kittens asleep, saying that they didn't make it through. Does the altitude actually make much of a physical difference, or are the drivers just so fit it doesn't affect them?
No, it makes a physical difference to drivers. I mean, I think, well, you've raced here, I've raced in a sports car, and it made a physical difference to me.
So you said on the podcast yesterday, you go up a flight of stairs and you can feel you get breathless.
More breathless there than anywhere else.
Because I went up, I thought, I don't remember being out of breath, but then I went up a flight of stairs earlier. I thought, wow.
Are you in Mexico City?
I'm breathless at the best of times going up a flight of stairs, let alone when I'm at high altitude.
Well, you were thinking about Mansell in Peraltada in 1990, that's why.
Just committed, can I take on one more flight of stairs here? The air's getting, and with every flight you go up, the air gets thinner as well by a matter of 5 metres or so. I didn't realise as well, before the Grand Prix came to town, how high Mexico City is.
Yeah.
So, to contextualise the altitude of Mexico City, the highest point of the UK is Ben Nevis, the summit of Ben Nevis. Mexico City dwarfs the peak of Ben Nevis. It's pretty much twice as high as Ben Nevis. So we're racing on two Ben Nevises, and this is just the city.
It's incredible. It's incredible altitude to be racing cars at. That's for sure. And I do remember it making a physical difference. What it makes more of, though, is an engineering difference. Race cars really do gasp for air around here, and anybody that's in tune with their racing machinery can feel that while they're driving around the circuit.
is pretty much, my research got to being pretty much like racing in the top of the French Alps. Not Mont Blanc, but of the skiing region of the French Alps.
Yes. So you're kind of 1850, 1900, aren't you? At the top.
A little bit higher even. A little bit higher. That's how high this city is. It really is. But the drivers are in peak physical condition, and in answer to your question, Roxy, they will be fine, I'm quite sure. And they've just had, haven't they, the most grueling of training camps ever just a few weeks ago in Qatar to prep them for another race.
To be fair, it's not a particularly physical layout of circuit, and there are several reasons for that. Firstly, the big long straight out front gives you a breather. Secondly, and this is probably the saving grace and the flip side of the coin, is you lose so much downforce, you lose a little bit of apex speed and therefore G. You lose a little bit of power as well, so it takes you a bit longer to get between the corners. It always interests me how more powerful cars, even more powerful cars with the same amount of grip, could be more physical because you get less rest time in between each individual corner. The saving grace is you're actually pulling less G and taking longer between the corners, so it probably pulls the physicality back a little bit. It's also nowhere near as hot, is it, as somewhere like Qatar or similar.
Indeed, that's the big respite of this place, and largely probably because of the altitude as well, that it doesn't get up. The cheer you just heard was, of course, because Sergio Perez just came into the other stadium section at turn 6. Drivers all now on long runs, so we've had the flurry of qualifying simulators. We've got less than 19 minutes left on the clock now, and we're deep into long run territory. So a big blend of soft, medium and hard tyres aboard the cars. There's currently 14 cars out on circuit. Norris, Bottas, Tsunoda, Zhou, Gasly and Stroll in the pits. Matthew Wiggins on hashtag BBC F1 says he's watching Brundle Senior whilst listening to Brundle Junior. Makes him feel like he's at altitude. A little bit dizzy. Too much Brundle.
A bit dizzy. Is there such thing? Yeah, I can confirm there is. Just turn your TV off and listen. Are we not giving you full coverage?
You got to have the pictures on a Friday. If you're staying up to watch FP2 and you have the choice to have the pictures, what they've done is have the pictures with the junior Brundle on the commentary. Never a poor move, that.
Thank you to everybody who's tuned in to listen to our commentary, whether you're pairing it with pictures or whether you're on the move and operating audio only. It's lovely to have your company.
More people have got in touch as well about this Red Bull scenario that we've got brewing. Nick has said, on the Red Bull Perez topic, I'm still surprised that they confirmed Ricciardo and Tsunoda at AlphaTauri next season so quickly. Seems they rushed into it without much need. And I'm a little bit agreeing with Nick as well.
Yeah, do you want to see how Ricciardo gets on before you discount Lawson? It's an interesting point. There was really no necessity, was there, to actually lay that on that particular seat. I know they wanted to introduce both drivers. There was no real need to lay that particular seat out until the end of the season.
And you had Lawson doing a great job as well, who is a younger prospect and certainly was equipped himself as an established Formula 1 driver would do in that seat as well. Ricciardo announced before he'd come back and really shown a lot. He's actually shown a lot today, still running in 6th place, 3/10 down on Verstappen's pace. Time is very close today as well, but Ricciardo will be getting a real buzz from this one. But certainly they locked in that team. It felt like unnecessary early, but I guess they wanted to just give Daniel Ricciardo a bit of reassurance that whatever happens, he'll be back in. They brought him back from a kind of year out, wasn't it, really, that he'd taken, or maybe a full-on retirement. So even though Lawson came in and turned a few heads.
Rain in again.
Yeah, rain may get heavier in intensity, 5 to 10 minutes.
Hey, Brundle, you're getting behind on the weather updates. Russell's ahead of you.
He is out on circuit, to be fair. I do agree with you. I mean, there's nothing to stop them, nailing down Tsunoda, letting him have the home Grand Prix with the knowledge that he's back in the car, and then leaving the other seat to play out for the rest of the year. But again, I think also with Ricciardo getting back in the car through to the rest of the year, perhaps they felt that there was performance to be gained by clarifying and confirming that he would be in the car, if that was their intention, through to next year, and not leaving him to make sort of errors of uncertainty as we listen into Carlos Sainz bouncing and bumping his way over the first, big time in the Ferrari, over the first 3 curbs of the lap.
So that's the corner where Sargent earlier on took out the floppy apex bollard, and Sainz just trying to go where they weren't supposed to go, but they can now. The bollard has been kicked away, bolted away there from Sargent earlier on. To probably complete the topic here on Red Bull, Finn Harrod got in touch as well. So do you think it would genuinely be a good move for Ricciardo to go back to Red Bull? There's the final question really, because if he is back to decent form, he left that team. If you're Daniel Ricciardo, would you go back?
I think there is really little point in going back to F1 at all if offered what is still the best seat in the house, not, being next to Max Verstappen notwithstanding, what is still the best seat in the house, you then decline that seat and say, actually no, what I'd like to do is keep driving for the junior team further down the grid and just sort of, see out my days as a night watchman, kind of, living the dream in AlphaTauri. I think anybody who thought like that, it's a bit like a football team who only ever want to score a 0-0 draw. They'll lose every game. You've got to go for it.
Try being a Crystal Palace fan.
No.
You snap on a 1-0 win, that's a great success.
I don't think I'm up for it.
It's a long, hard year, every year. But that's why they don't come harder than Sussex Grit over here. It's taken years of supporting Crystal Palace cheer for the 0-0 draw, and you get some psychological defence in the end.
I'd love to be into football enough to get involved with this banter, but I'm just plain not, Palmer. I'm really sorry.
It's all right. You're in good company here. 13 minutes and 15 seconds left on the clock. Long run still very much in play. 19 cars now out on circuit, running through all the different tyres, gathering all the data. Logan Sargent is a point scorer. Are we happy for Logan Sargent getting in the points? He was a big beneficiary, wasn't he, of the double disqualification?
He was. That is the way the cookie does crumble, and I do think it will sort of silence the critics slightly. Not necessarily that he scored those points, because that was kind of incidental in a way, given the way that the post-race scrutineering worked out, but being so close to Alex Albon in terms of his finishing position corrected was an important moment for him. We've got to remember a driver that a couple of races ago was being given we've told Logan what he needs to do, and if he doesn't do it, he may well be out of the car. That was an important Grand Prix after what have been a lot of mistakes, errors, crashes, having to pull out of various contests on the run in.
The only seat left up for grabs for 2024. Red Bull locked in, AlphaTauri locked in. We're not expecting changes to come, but as Andrew Benson said, you never say never with that team. Sometimes they change when you're least expecting it. But Logan Sargent, Andrew, we were talking in Austin, saying that Williams and James Vowles, they wanted a reason to keep Logan Sargent. Could 10th place and a first point be that reason, do you think?
Well, it's a step in the right direction, isn't it? But Vowles has been very clear that he's going to take till the end of the year before he decides. So I think if Sargent can keep that sort of progress going, then he's got a decent chance. But if he has another couple of big crashes, then that's going to flip things the other way.
And he needs to stop doing damage to the car, that's for sure. Really hurting the team in a cost cap formula. Interesting, most of this long running being done on the medium and the hard compound tyre, and just watching Lewis Hamilton there, some 4-5 seconds back from their optimum times. The car's moving around a lot underneath the drivers, especially from the rear, and it's interesting. They're really struggling now on these long runs.
Often you can get graining on this circuit with low grip, low temperatures. it could be quite tricky. Certainly parts of the Grand Prix where you end up just sliding on the surface of the tyre.
Well, sliding on the surface of the tyre they are as the session wears on, the lap on lap. The runs are long, the drivers are focused. The race runs are coming in. It is time for Long Run Corner with Mr. Andrew Benson.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
You can go the distance, we'll find out in the long run, in the long run.
Well, do you know what? Max Verstappen's not the quickest. How about that? So, thankfully, there's a lot of drivers out on the medium tyre, and the quickest one is actually Lando Norris. Less laps than Verstappen, about half the number of laps, but he's averaging 1 minute 22.6 at the moment. Verstappen, by contrast, is averaging 1 minute 23.4. Now, if I take out Verstappen's last 3 laps to give us a simple sample, that's still not quicker than Norris. So that's looking encouraging. Also, Hamilton, 23.1, quicker than Verstappen on average. And Leclerc, 23.2, and Perez, 23.2. All looking quicker than Max Verstappen at the moment. Now, if you were to bet, is that going to be the case in the race? You'd say definitely not. But those are the numbers as they stand at the moment.
I'm intrigued. And a 1 lap pace, let's not forget, Verstappen is at the top, but he's only 1/10 clear of Norris as well. The times are generally very close. Are we going to have a Grand Prix on our hands on Sunday?
One might hope so.
Well, what's interesting about that for me is that on 1 lap, Mercedes have looked not in the ballpark so far today, have they? They were slow in the first session. I thought they might pick it up in the second, and they really didn't. They were Hamilton. Okay, he's only 3/10 off or something, but 3/10 is quite a lot around Mexico, and there's a lot of cars between him and Max Verstappen pace setting. But on the long run, he's looking good, but not as good as Norris, which is again confusing, because this is not. If you ask, Lando Norris was saying only yesterday that after a run of circuits that they thought were good for them, they've now got a couple of circuits coming up that they think are not good for them in comparison. So, slightly confusing picture is emerging from Mexico City this afternoon, evening, depending on where you are.
Norris was quite downbeat before Austin, though. Didn't think that circuit would suit him. Then he qualified on the front row, led half the Grand Prix. McLaren, I feel like, are a team that downplay expectations generally. Mercedes, I agree. I've been surprised how underwhelming they've been so far this weekend, given their performance recently, and I thought the circuit would suit them a little bit more.
It's interesting to hear that Hamilton, though, is up on the long run, because watching into his the attitude of the car on the long run, and you can listen in now to George Russell, who's making his way through the final few corners of the lap. The attitude of the car looks awful. So it's interesting to see how, the balance issues notwithstanding, they are actually delivering the laps, and the numbers look fine.
Could be a case of the tyres not working necessarily for 1 lap, but over multiple laps is coming to them potentially.
Also, what's interesting is on the 8th lap or so of his long run, Verstappen's just done his fastest lap of the entire run.
Okay.
So
back to reality.
Whereas Leclerc, for example, has dropped off from a 23.8 then into a 23.2, even a 22.8, and is now lapping in the 24s. Maybe that was an off lap for him. We'll have to wait to see him come round again. But going from 23.4 at the start of his run, Verstappen now is lapping in 22.8. That does not bode that well for the rest of the field.
Yeah, so he is still there. Well, who knew? Max Verstappen is still going to be there or thereabouts on the race run. Leclerc on that last lap did whack the curb at Logan Sargent Corner, the apex of turn 2. So maybe that explains a little bit why he was off. 6.5 minutes left on the clock. That long run corner, particularly for Kaylee, who stayed awake simply for long run corner. There you go, Andrew. Your work here is done for the day.
Thank you, Kaylee, is all I can say.
Along with thousands of others, surely, staying awake for long run corner. Why would you not?
The others aren't tweeting in about it, though.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Kaylee giving Andrew Benson the love he deserves for another deeply insightful long run corner that gets us all on the edge of our seats for the Grand Prix Sunday. That'll be on 5 Live on Sunday evening. 8 o'clock start.
I remember when you were like, long runs, what do they matter?
Look, when you get to hear the jingle on a Friday evening, followed by the dulcet tones of Andrew Benson, makes long runs worthwhile. 5.5 minutes left on the clock.
I distinctly remember the Checkered Flag podcast debate about whether McLaren would be any good this weekend. Shall we dive back into that? There was one actor in that podcast, I believe, that felt that they would be very strong, and another actor that felt that they'd be weak this weekend.
I played the role of I think they'll struggle. The sound you can hear is Lando Norris, second place today, with the fastest race run. Flying so far this weekend. Piastri down in 9th place, so split for the McLaren so far today overall.
Okay. Yeah, a hedge really. I'll give you that one. He does look good though, Norris. And I tell you what, this race run, when compared to the drop-off that, even just from watching them go lap on lap, compared to the drop-off that Mercedes are having, Norris is hanging on to the set of medium tyres that he's pounding round on very nicely indeed.
And the McLaren was another car that had no issue with plank wear as well in Austin. So they maybe had something more in there, or maybe the car was optimised as it was and they didn't need to run lower. But you could hear the skid there of the bottom, the underside of the McLaren on the asphalt as Norris hits the brakes to start another lap with 4 minutes left to go. The session, 26 laps for Norris, 29 for the most of anyone, which is a share between Bottas and Sainz and Tsunoda out there. A couple of quick questions on the hashtag BBC F1. James Spencer has been listening to the elder Brundle a little bit too long, who said that the height in Mexico is equal to Ben Nevis and Snowden. Have you folks climbed either? Have you guys climbed Ben Nevis or Snowden? Any interest?
Not a big climber, me. No. I'm a downhill all the way kind of guy.
You got to climb up to come down, though.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay,
that's what ski lifts are for.
Yeah, flat no.
That's a flat no
from the box. No Nevis, no Snowden. Hard and soft shell tacos. Which one takes the?
It's a soft shell. It's a soft shell.
Benton.
Yeah, soft shell, fish taco all the way.
Yeah, I'm a soft shell. So that's a couple of absolute.
It's good to get consensus in the box on something today.
Yeah. Hey, who knows if McLaren are going to be competitive this weekend or not? No consensus on that. But hard or soft shell tacos?
I mean, to be fair, it's an open goal, isn't it, for consensus? That
it's yeah. Why even hard shell? Who
What's
made
a hard
the
shell taco?
Was that a soft shell taco that went stale?
That's a bleeding lip waiting to happen, isn't it?
It's a really tough call for someone. You're wondering when you're at dinner with someone who orders a hard shell taco.
The sound you can hear is Yuki Tsunoda, who's making his way through the middle sector, and he's 12th. So quite a long way, actually. Interestingly, quite a long way this weekend. Well, some 3/10 behind Daniel Ricciardo. The rain has returned from the resident bubbly cloud down in the final sector, and it looks to be wetting the circuit surface to me, Jolyon.
Okay. So Eagle-Eye Brundle has said the grip level is reducing. Tsunoda completes another lap. Plenty of cars have returned to the pits now with just over 2 minutes left. Verstappen is top of the times. Norris second. Leclerc, Bottas, Perez, Ricciardo, Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri, Russell, Sainz, Tsunoda, Zhou, Albon, Hulkenberg, Gasly, Sargent, Stroll, Magnussen and Alonso is the order. That was set quite a while ago now on the soft tyres for all qualifying sims for all. Fernando Alonso props up the times because he had the day's only spin, a high-speed spin through turn 10 and managed to anchor it on the brakes and keep it out of the barriers, but he did root a set of soft tyres. So Alonso down in 20th, and actually Stroll in 18th also didn't run a soft tyre. Plenty of cars have retreated to the pits, but with a minute and a half left on the clock, Verstappen goes for another foray. So there's still something out there for drivers to learn, even as the track gets maybe a little damp.
There sure is. The proximity of the times is quite impressive. A second puts you inside if you're inside a second, you're inside the top 16 Gasly is the last driver within a second of the pace. He is 9/10 of a second back from the time of Max Verstappen. So delivery will be everything come qualifying day. And we've had various interlopers into the top positions. Today's interloper is Valtteri Bottas, who's done a lovely job on his set of softs. So I think, what does that mean? That means for Q1, there is a very big chance that a major driver, a major scout will be taken and somebody will be knocked out if they don't quite get the lap right. And then it's going to be extremely close and mixed up in the mid-grid. So it will definitely be an interesting Saturday, even if the race pace differential is large to Verstappen, which it doesn't really look like it is. So I think we're looking for a very strong Grand Prix weekend for the neutral viewer, to be honest.
It looks like it's game on, doesn't it? It's been a decent day of action. Clean running for pretty much everyone. Just Théo Pourchaire, who was one of the 5 rookies in the car for FP1, didn't have a run out. Everyone else has collected some decent data out there, and it's been pretty much a yellow flag free session, yellow flag free day, as we come to the final few seconds of proceedings. The sun has come out for the last little bit as well. We've just about got away with green flag running and relevant running for everyone. The checker flag now out, and the final order then for FP2 will be Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc, your top 3. Bottas up in 4th, Perez 5th, and Ricciardo, a great job from him, in 6th. Hamilton, Ocon, Piastri and Russell rounding out the top 10. Then it's Sainz, Tsunoda, Zhou, Albon, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Sargent, Stroll, Magnussen and Alonso rounding out the order. And we know Aston Martin probably have a little bit more in there as well. So it does look like it's going to be a tense qualifying session tomorrow as well. There's going to be a lot of pressure on delivering that lap, and it's not an easy lap. It's quite complex.
A lot of braking zones with a long time to think about. From the braking zone down to turn 1, very easy to make an error with those front tyres cold. It's hard to get the energy through the tyre here. And then you've got another big opportunity to have a silly lock-up and miss your point down towards turn 4. The nasty spiky curves all the way through the middle sector, and then you've got to get your technicals right from turn 12 to the line. It is a tricky lap, as you say, JP, to string together, and several drivers will end the day here on Planet Nowhere, won't they? Both Aston Martins. A lot of head scratching surely going to be going on down there. Been a bit of a nowhere day for George Russell, who's appears to have struggled a bit in the Merc.
It was literally nowhere earlier, wasn't he, when Vesti was in the car?
Yeah, I know, but even still, you know, behind Hamilton.
That was Carlos Sainz reporting that his mirror has cracked on his left-hand side, and the drivers all circulating now. They've just done a practice start and will come back into the garage, so Sainz can just coax that in. Who do you think will be the most happy with today's running then?
I think Ricciardo has had the strongest day of any driver really on the grid, considering he finishes the session in 6th position in the AlphaTauri. That's 2 sessions sequentially ahead of Tsunoda, and has looked every bit like he belongs up there. It doesn't look like it's a lucky lap or a lightning strike. So I think Daniel Ricciardo is looking very, very strong indeed to put in a good performance this weekend.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda will start the race on Sunday from the back of the field as Bottas goes racing with Verstappen, although we're going to touch into turn 2. The crowd enjoyed that one as well. Verstappen around the outside of Bottas into turn 2, so practicing a little bit of race draft on this basically a reconnaissance lap now back to the pits.
Yeah, entirely post-session that was off the practice start after the session, and it was Valtteri Bottas diving to the inside.
Well, maybe Bottas, on the back of being 4th place today, maybe he's thinking, maybe I need to get racy, practice racing with the Red Bulls. I'm around them.
Let's see how my start it compares to Verstappen. Let's do a bit of a dummy run, but I'm going to take the lead.
Well, he's just on a lap quicker than Perez. He fancies dicing with the big boys this weekend again.
Big rain now on the front straight, in time for it all to finish. And Valtteri Bottas.
He even used DRS. Unbelievable.
That's the GP on the radio to Max Verstappen. So he even used DRS to try and get around. It was quite the lunge back from Verstappen, who held on to the position, in case everyone's really on the edge of their seats wondering how that little duel ended at the end of this session. Yeah, I think Norris and McLaren will be very happy as well. They're in the fight. Ferrari, Leclerc just a couple of tenths down from Verstappen. many teams in the fight. And Mercedes one lap pace, probably the curiosity of the sessions so far.
Yeah, they didn't seem to have it, did they? Weren't up there, and it looked like, for all the world, like a tidy-ish lap from Lewis Hamilton, but them and the early laps from the Ferraris not looking too great before they tweaked it and popped Charles Leclerc up into P3.
So then Max Verstappen completes a clean sweep of practices for the Friday of the Mexican Grand Prix, looking for win number 16 of 19 this weekend. A record-breaking season for the three-time world champion, and he started it in fine form. 1/10 clear of Lando Norris in the McLaren. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari just 2/10 back in third position. The long runs make it look like it's all to play for as well. Verstappen close on pace with the McLaren, close on pace with the Mercedes. So definitely a Grand Prix worth tuning in for, and a qualifying session worth tuning in for tomorrow as well. We've got third practice coming up tomorrow from 6:30. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.